Hello Raptors fans, and welcome back to Raptors Report. Today we will be discussing the Toronto Raptors' victory over the Golden State Warriors. But first of all, I want to say thanks, and I'm sorry for missing the last game. I had a family obligation, but everything is right in the world. Everything is okay. I'm back, and I'm ready to talk Raptors basketball. And what a time to return. What a time to come back and have thoughts about the Toronto Raptors, because they were able to win a game for just the second time in 16 contests, and they did so against the moribund Golden State Warriors, who looked absolutely terrible in last night's contest. It looked like a stiff wind could blow them over. They didn't look very steady. They were turning the ball over, playing sloppy, playing without a purpose, and it took just one man. One big performance for a guy who is red hot right now. None other than Canada's own Chris Boucher, who had one of the best performances in a quarter of basketball that I have ever seen from a Toronto Raptor. It was really that magnificent. He had 17 points in the fourth quarter, all of them majestic and audacious. His crazy game that we have seen both the highs and the lows of. He had the highest of highs last night, and it was able to propel the Toronto Raptors over the finish line. And I kind of wanted to talk about Chris Boucher today because I don't get a lot of opportunities to do a lot of puff pieces, do a lot of positive stories about the Raptors. They have just been too dismal, too bad for that. But today, it's time we honor a guy who has been with the Toronto Raptors for a long time now. He is the last remaining player from the Toronto Raptors championship team back in 2019, which seems like yesterday if you're an old guy like me, but he didn't get pretty much any playing time during that run, but he was on the team nonetheless. He has a ring, and he is a big part of the culture. All of the members of the Raptors who were part of that team still dap him up, or, have big respect for Chris Boucher. And what he's doing this season is kind of what I see as the last hurrah of that group, being able to come in and have huge performances, big nights for the Toronto Raptors, and really doing the Toronto Raptors a kind of a solid, because if you've been watching these videos, if you've been on social media, if you have your ear to the ground, it seems as though there are a lot of teams who are looking at Chris Boucher as a player who could help them. Teams that are in playoff contention, teams that are looking for someone who could push them over the hump, teams that are really, really good, that have won it all before, are looking at this guy and saying, okay, well, here's a bench piece that could provide a little oomph. And this is really surprising stuff because Chris Boucher was not seen as an elite prospect as he was growing up. He really got into organized basketball at age 19. And there's a really, really good piece on Chris Boucher and the circumstances that he dealt with growing up by Michael Grange. It's called Wildest Dreams, and it details the story of his life, essentially, growing up in Quebec. He was a line cook at St. Hubert, which is the famous chicken restaurant in Quebec. There are a couple here in Toronto, but he was homeless for a period of time when his parents split up, and it was kind of a stroke of luck that allowed him to show his skills off versus an AAU team, and he put up 44 points and kind of surprised a bunch of people. A lot of people, there was a really good story in that piece where Chris Boucher put his height at 6'9" and applied to be part of one of the professional teams in Quebec. And Chris Boucher absent-mindedly posted a picture of himself sitting down, which led the scout to not believe that he was actually 6'9" and kind of pass over his application. So he was kind of toiling away in obscurity until he hit his big break, and he went to Oregon, where he was impressive, but he got injured, and then he went to the Warriors undrafted, and he washed out there. He got picked up by the Raptors, and then the rest is history. He was a big part of the Raptors 905, was the G League MVP and the league's DPOY, and then he started getting minutes with the big club, and he made a big impact in the Tampa season with the Raptors, where they played in Tampa. The cursed season, God, that was a horrible season, but he really showed what he could do there. And from that point on, he kind of bounced in and out of the lineup. But when Darko Rajakovic took over, Chris Boucher's tendencies of being a guy that broke plays, called his own number, maybe isn't the greatest defensive player when it comes to his awareness, I think rubbed Darko the wrong way, and he picked up a lot of DNP CDs in that first year with Darko, and then this year he's been sporadically in and out of the lineup. But in certain circumstances, he's been incredible, and in others, not so much, but he has really hit his stride in the past couple of games. Darko kind of trotted him out in garbage time against the New York Knicks in the blowout there, and he kind of single-handedly brought the Raptors bench back within, striking distance. They didn't, end up getting anywhere, but he had an incredibly efficient 10 points off of the bench. It looked like a big fire was lit under him from being benched, and he said, screw this. It's my time to shine. It's time to go out there and really show what I can do. And from that point forward to now, he's been an unbelievable heater. 4 straight games over 10 points. He had a 23-point, 12-rebound game in 26 minutes against the Cavs and was like the MVP of that game when the Raptors almost beat the Cavs. He was a big contributor in the Detroit game where he had 14 points. And then last night with as I said, one of the best quarters of basketball I have ever seen. He had 18 points, 17 of them in the fourth quarter to propel the Raptors to victory over his former team, the Golden State Warriors. But I kind of want to talk about what's happening here and what I think that the Toronto Raptors should do with him this season. So I know that Chris Boucher is the feel-good story, but I think that it's time to give Chris Boucher a chance to spread his wings and contribute on a team that is going to go deep into the playoffs. I'll always cheer for Chris Boucher, even if he's not on the Toronto Raptors, but he is having probably his best season in years. He's averaging almost 11 points per game on almost 50% shooting. And he's, with his amazing shooting over the past couple of games, he's buoyed his 3-point percentage all the way up to 36.5%, which is crazy because it was under 30% for most of the season, but now he's on that hot streak and he is really coming on. And I think it's time for the Toronto Raptors, to kind of set Chris Boucher free, put him on a team that really could use him, and also sell high. That sounds kind of cynical, but as we all know, this isn't to denigrate him as a player, but he is a very hot and cold player. That's Chris Boucher. One night he is going for 17 points in a quarter. The other night he's going, 0 of 5 from 3 with 5 points in 20 minutes and not playing poor defense. Last night there was a tweet from reporter Adam Lascaris who mentioned that there were a lot of scouts in the building. He covers the Raptors and Leafs, among others, but he mentioned that the Nuggets, the Clippers, and the Grizzlies all had staff listed at the game, and they were there to see Chris Boucher. Chris Boucher is probably one of the Raptors' most tradable assets this season. He's an expiring contract, and he looks like a guy that could be instant offense for a team off of the bench. Giving a jolt of energy to a team, he can be a difference maker. It's very easy to see why other teams, especially teams that don't have great benches, especially the Denver Nuggets, why they would be interested in Chris Boucher. And if you'll recall, a couple of weeks ago, I made a video detailing all of the different Raptors and some trade scenarios that they could be involved in. And one of them that I saw was the Denver Nuggets. I think he makes the most sense for them, and they do have some interesting assets for the Toronto Raptors. They're a pretty natural trade partner for the Raptors because they're in a position where they have a player that is not a contributor. So Zeke Naji, who was a draft pick a couple of years back, he has not really done a lot for them, and they mystifyingly signed him to a 4-year deal. His contract is pretty bad. It's almost $10 million a year for 4 years. So that is kind of dead salary for them. He's not a contributor. They can't really play him in the playoffs. And they're looking for a guy, especially at the big spot, who can stretch the floor, provide energy, and play next to Nikola Jokic. Hey, that sounds like Chris Boucher. Yep, they could probably use a Chris Boucher type player. And the deal that I proposed was Chris Boucher for Zeke Naji, Vlatko Cancar, and the Nuggets 2031 first round draft pick. The 2031 draft pick is the only first-round pick that they can trade, and they've traded most of their seconds as well. So that is far off, but it is one of their last tradable draft picks. So it would be kind of a big investment for a player who's only going to stick around for one season. With that said, Zeke Nnaji is kind of a dead weight on the Nuggets salary cap, which means that they aren't able to use that portion of the salary cap to improve a team that has Nikola Jokic on it. The greatest player of his generation, he has a window, and this is his prime. This is when they should be looking to compete. 2031 is a long time away. Due to the Stepien rule, they can't trade away firsts in consecutive drafts, so it's not like they would be without picks during that time. It would just be every other year. So getting a playoff contributor in Chris Boucher, a guy who can come in and spark their team off of the bench, would be interesting. With that said, there's another deal that the Toronto Raptors could make. It would be Chris Boucher for Zeke Nnaji and Daron Holmes. Daron Holmes is a guy that I really liked in last year's draft. Daron Holmes tore his Achilles when he was playing in the Summer League. And obviously that was, a big blow for the Nuggets. They're trying to bring some younger guys along, and he would have been part of that, but he hasn't been able to play at all this season. It depends on what the Nuggets would value more. I would be okay with either Daron Holmes or that 2031 draft pick. And in fact, maybe I would be even more supportive of a Daron Holmes pickup, because he is a guy that I think would fit on the Toronto Raptors. He's 6'10", he can shoot the ball, he looks like a pretty intriguing role player type that the Toronto Raptors could develop. They need size, they need shooting. He kind of ticks a lot of boxes for them, and I kind of like him as a prospect. I think that he could be a pretty good pickup. So that's a pretty interesting trade, those two options there. So the Clippers were also in attendance during last night's game, and the deal that I cooked up for them with Chris Boucher is pretty spicy. It's Nicolas Batum, who is pretty washed at this point. Pretty safe to say. His best years are behind him. He's still a pretty good defensive player, but is just not able to contribute on the offensive end. And he's owed $5 million after this season on a player option, which he's probably going to pick up. He and Amir Coffey. So Amir Coffey is a pretty good player, not a very good defender, a tall kind of wing guard type player who's shooting very well from three-point range. And the reason that the Clippers might want to entertain this deal is that he and Boucher are very similar in terms of production. They're both kind of offense first. They can both shoot the ball, but the Clippers are looking for somebody who is bigger, who can play at the big spots. And also, Amir Coffey is in a similar situation to Chris Boucher in that he is an unrestricted free agent at the end of this season. So the Toronto Raptors would be trading Chris Boucher for Amir Coffey and Nicolas Batum. Nicolas Batum being a negative asset here because he has the additional year on his deal and he's really just not a contributor anymore. So this would free up cap space for the Clippers, and the Toronto Raptors would be getting the bird rights for Amir Coffey. And they would be able to offer him a contract in the offseason. And I like Amir Coffey as a player. I think he's a pretty gifted shooter who can play in a lot of different lineups because he's pretty big. And I think that he would kind of be an intriguing role player to add into the Toronto Raptors. The Clippers would be adding some size. They would be adding a similar amount of production. And if Amir Coffey isn't in their future plans, because they do have a ton of salary tied up to their team right now, they might balk at a big offer to Amir Coffey. He's probably going to demand somewhere a little over $10 million a season, probably somewhere in the range of $10 to $15 million a season. If they don't want to offer them that, they might look to try and get off of Nicolas Batum's contract. I thought that was a kind of a cool deal. But yeah, Chris Boucher is a really inspiring story. I like him as a Raptor. I think that what he's done for the Toronto Raptors is underrated. Obviously a member of that championship team, even though he wasn't a big part of it. But over the years, he has provided a spark off of the Raptors bench and has really been their best bench player for, the better part of 5 years. And I think it would be nice both for the Toronto Raptors and for Chris Boucher to give him a send-off, send him to a team that could use him, that needs a player with his skill set, that gives him a chance to compete for another championship. He is an older player, and I don't think that he's part of the Toronto Raptors' future. I don't think that they're going to give him a contract in the offseason. So it would be nice if the Toronto Raptors could send him somewhere and get something in return. But with that said, I think that we should probably get to the player evaluations. We always start with a starting lineup, and we're not going to change the story here. We're going to start with the best player in the starting lineup, and that was Scottie Barnes. Scottie Barnes has been on an underrated little tear recently. I think that he has looked very good, very capable. He's making really good decisions. He is playing as a big more often now. He's setting more screens. He is protecting the basket. He's playing great defense. He's creating on offense. His turnaround jump shot is now his kind of signature go-to offensive move. He's just been great, and last night was no different. He was monumental for the Raptors and probably the second biggest reason for the win, or maybe even the biggest reason, because although Chris Boucher did have that huge performance in the fourth quarter, Scottie Barnes was delivering in all of the quarters on both ends. He had 23 points on 21 shots, so not the most efficient night, but pretty good. He was 1 of 4 from 3. He was 4 of 6 from the line, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks, 3 turnovers. Just what can you say? He is doing a really, really good job. He's playing smart basketball, and he's making winning plays. I can't recall the last time he had a truly underwhelming performance. I thought he took some kind of iffy shots last night from 3. Some of them were in late shot clock situations, but there was one particular one where he shot it early in the shot clock off of the dribble, and I don't think it was a great shot for him. But other than that, I mean, the guy is playing smart basketball, focused basketball. He is trying to get this team wins. So you got to give the guy some flowers. There's been a huge debate about him as a player. Is he a has-been? Has he fallen off? I heard someone say that his fall off has to be studied. I am really tired of that kind of narrative. What he is a good player, very good player on a bad team. And the badness of the team is coloring people's vision of him as a player. I think that that's the wrong approach. I think people can't see the forest for the trees here. They are seeing the individual losses. They are not seeing the big picture. They're not seeing his growth as a player. I think that he's taken a lot of positive steps this season, and he delivered last night for the Toronto Raptors. And then there's a big kind of fall off in the starting lineup. We'll go to Jakob Poeltl second. He's second so many times on these lists, but his defense was good. His offense, he missed a lot of layups, but I think overall he was a big reason for the Toronto Raptors winning last night. He was big on the boards. He did a good job protecting the basket. He had 13 points on 11 shots, so over 50%, but a lot of those shots were gimmies that he missed. So I'm not going to say a great offensive night. He had 13 rebounds, and I think really took advantage of the Warriors' size problems on the defensive end. He got 5 offensive rebounds. That was big, creating extra possessions. 2 assists, 1 really nice pass to RJ Barrett for an easy layup. He had 1 block and 2 turnovers. Generally just did a good job on defense, did a good job on the boards. Not a great night on offense. He missed a lot of layups and really limited Trayce Jackson-Davis, who is the center for the Golden State Warriors. He only had 3 points on 1 of 4 shooting. And when he was on the floor, the Raptors were playing competent defense in the paint. When he was off the floor, the Raptors were kind of a disaster in the paint. So he definitely has to be lauded for his effort on defense and on the boards. Next up, we'll go to RJ Barrett. RJ Barrett has been struggling recently, especially in terms of his shooting. He was 1 of 3 from 3 last night, which isn't great, but not terrible. He had 15 points on 14 shots, so not very efficient. He was 2 of 3 from the free throw line, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 turnovers, kind of a mediocre game from him. Defense continues to be somewhat of an issue, so there were a couple of defensive lapses from him last night, but I think he had a kind of a mediocre night, not a great night from him. After that, we've got Grady Dick. Grady Dick did some decent scoring. In the first half, he looked really good, very energized. He was very involved with the plays. I think as the game wore on, he just didn't play very much in the second half. He finished with 12 points on 4 of 10 shooting, 2 of 6 from 3, so his shooting has not really been there. He was 2 of 2 from the line, 3 rebounds, an assist, and 1 turnover. Got to see more from this guy. I really like the start of the season, but he just is not, he's hit a slide. Sophomore slump, I guess you'd call it. Not a great night on defense for him, although he had it going in the first half. Last up, we've got Davion Mitchell. Davion Mitchell had 0 points in 27 minutes. He was mainly tasked with guarding Steph Curry. He had 6 assists, 0 turnovers, so a lot of those assists were kind of the garden variety to Jakob Poeltl, where he would just pass it to Poeltl. Poeltl would put up a floater, and the floater would go in. So nothing special there, and his pass accuracy is still an issue. Steph Curry, obviously one of the best offensive players of all time. He finished with 26 points. And he is so crafty. I think that's kind of one of the Achilles heels for Davion Mitchell, is that he can get baited. There are problems where he overcommits into a player, tries to play a little too hard, and Steph Curry is very good at using the refs to get those types of players off of him. Hint, hint. But yeah, not a great night from Davion Mitchell. He's a defensive specialist, and he didn't contribute anything on offense, really. And yeah, Steph Curry had a pretty good night. Next up, we got to go to the bench. We'll give him his flowers yet again. This was an unbelievable performance from Chris Boucher. One of the best halves of basketball I've ever seen from a Toronto Raptor. He was on fire and just a transcendent performance. When you get that excitement build up in your body, when you're seeing a guy do all these things that add up, one after, like, the crescendo keeps rising and you keep feeling that surge, the tingles where you're like, oh God, this guy is going off. He had an unbelievable dunk. He caught the ball. They closed out too hard. He curled through the lane and threw down a nasty jam that made the bench go nuts. And then he hit just a fadeaway 3-point shot at the buzzer, and it all looked like a ceiling scraping shot, and it fell right in. Matt Devlin had an awesome call on that. From the heavens, Chris Boucher. What a game. Man, he really propelled the Raptors and has been doing so over the past couple of games. This is just a legendary hot streak that he is on right now. Yeah, he had 18 points, 17 in the fourth quarter. He was 7 of 9 from the field, 3 of 5 from 3, 7 rebounds, 4 offensive rebounds. That's huge. 2 assists, a block, and 0 turnovers. The guy is just on another level right now. And yeah, I'm really, really happy that he's putting it together and showing people what he's capable of. Great, great story. Next up, Ochai Agbaji had a good night. 12 points on 5 of 8 shooting. He was 2 of 5 from 3, so good shooting night from him. 3 rebounds, 2 blocks. Those 2 really nice blocks. He blocked Trace Jackson Davis. He had another block, just really protecting the rim, showing that he can contribute off of the bench too. And he was, had a really good game. And I'm glad that his shot seems to be coming around. That was one of the great developments during this season, was seeing him become a knockdown 3-point shooter in the corners. He's kind of back to that. He's hitting threes again. Very happy to see that. And then Jamal Shed had a very good first half. He went 3 of 4 from 3, had 9 points. His shot really has come around. He is making it rain from 3-point range. The shot looks good. Looks kind of Fred VanVleet-ish. I know many people have pointed that out. He had 9 points, 3 of 6 shooting, 3 of 4 from 3, 1 rebound, 2 assists, 1 turnover. I like his passing. I like the way he runs the offense. I think he's a very solid backup point guard with the potential to be better. After that, we will get into the negative performances. There were 2 guys that were just otherworldly bad last night. Bruce Brown continues to struggle. Last night was another just big-time disaster from him. 0 points. He was 0 for 2 from the field. 3 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, 2 blocks. Okay. 3 turnovers. He thinks he can handle the ball. He's not very good at it. He thinks that the floater is a good shot for him. It isn't. He's really struggling. And last night was horrible. Kelly Olynyk, ditto last night. Those 2 were teaming up to make my head explode. He had 2 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, a block, and a turnover. And his paint defense and rebounding are horrible. Horrible. He consistently gets out rebounded. He's flat-footed. He's just standing in the paint. Other guys jump over top of him and grab rebounds. It's just mind-bending watching him try to grab rebounds. As soon as the trade deadline hits, if those 2 aren't off of the team, they should be racking up DNPs, because I don't want to watch them anymore. They're driving me crazy. So hopefully they could find trades for those guys. Otherwise, not enjoying the process there. But in terms of the game as a whole, we kind of discussed it already. The Warriors are really struggling. Draymond Green is out. Podziemski is out. Kuminga, one of their top scorers, is out. And they had to play a whole bunch of players that are just not very impactful. The team is kind of just like Steph Curry, Andrew Wiggins, and then a bunch of kind of bums. Like, these guys are just not good. Buddy Hield started off the season hot. He did the Buddy Hield thing where he comes onto your team, hits a whole bunch of threes. You're like, oh my God, is this guy legit? He's like a super scorer. And then the real Buddy Hield shows himself and he's making boneheaded plays. He threw the ball out of bounds, wasn't even close to making it to the player he was intending it to, threw it out of bounds. He had a horrible game shooting the ball and just does not play the game the right way. Dennis Schroeder continues to be kind of a nobody for them. I called it when he went there. I was like, this guy is an anti-Warriors player. He likes to pound the ball. He likes to hold on to the ball and cook, and that's not the Warriors system. And ever since he got there, he's been horrible. He had actually a better than usual night with 12 points on 12 shots. Usually for them, he's shooting like 33% from the field. So he's been very poor for them. And the Raptors just needed one heroic performance to kind of push them over the precipice to beat this kind of sad sack team. And they got it from Chris Boucher. So hooray, they were able to halt another long winless slide and defeat the Warriors. So that's good. And to people who are worried about tanking, they've won 2 games in the past 16 games. Chill. Okay, they are one of the worst teams in the league. Next up, the Toronto Raptors play against Boston tomorrow, 7:30. It'll be in Toronto, so that should be an interesting game. The Celtics kind of are in cruise control mode this season. They have the championship hangover where they're not trying to get the best record in the league. They did that last season. What they're trying to do this year is stay healthy, play good basketball, and then get ready for the postseason when they can make another run. So they don't have like the most amazing record, but I still think that they're pretty heavy favorites against the Raptors. And it'll be interesting to see if Emmanuel Quickley is back because he was out with an injury. He kind of got banged up, I guess. His back is giving him a bit of trouble. So he sat out against the Warriors. Maybe he'll be back against the Celtics, so we'll see how that goes. In any case, that is the video. What do you think about Chris Boucher? I know there is a small contingent of fans who think that the Toronto Raptors should keep him. So if you're among that group, why don't you plead your case in the comment section? If you're not, maybe you can give some suggestions about what you think the Toronto Raptors could be looking to get back for him, because he really has kind of increased his stock, in my opinion. So let me know here in the comments, and also on Twitter and Blue Sky, where you can reach me at Raps Report. I love talking to Raptors fans. We're the best. And if you enjoyed this content, please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.